Welcome to this Amazee.io webinar on Lagoon Insights. This is a really good opportunity for us to talk about and to demo some of the functionality that our colleagues over at Amazee Labs have built to provide a bit of intelligence into web applications. We'll be covering the problems, facts, and metadata functionality. So my name's Toby Bellwood. I'm the product lead for Amazee.io. I take sort of primary responsibility for Lagoon and trying to work out what we're doing, where we're going, and how we're building it. And I'm joined by Blaze.
Howdy. I'm a developer at Amazee Labs, and the last couple of months have been working with Toby on Lagoon with all of the things that he comes up with. So yeah, lots of fun.
Implementing my crazy schemes.
Yep.
Or bringing crazy schemes to me that you've already half implemented.
And then you name them, basically. What happened with Insights.
Until about 3 weeks ago, this was called the Problems and Facts webinar. So we fancied it needed a name, so Lagoon Insights it is.
Now we just need a logo. That'll be next.
I haven't asked for one yet, but
okay. I'll send through the request. Cool.
So yeah, we'll be running this as a webinar. More than happy for people to come in, ask questions. There's a Q&A feature in Zoom, there's a little button that says questions and answer or Q&A or something. If you click on that and ask a question, I'll be able to sort of work out the right time to either address it or get Blaze to answer it. The question and answers are open so everyone can see them and upvote and potentially respond if you know the answer better than we do. We'll also be recording this mostly because at some point we've got to create, it'll be very useful going forwards, and we'll be doing sort of a follow-up blog post about the things we've covered, because this is this is the first time a lot of people have seen this functionality. So I'll start off, cover a little bit about Amazee.io. Amazee.io offers enterprise-grade, secure, scalable, open-source container hosting. Familiar, a lot of you are probably already familiar with who Amazee.io are, but we work with a lot of large-scale organizations on sort of delivering their web applications based on containers. We've been around for 5 years now. We think we're pretty good at this. We think we've got a fairly good idea of what we're doing, so we back ourselves. And Blaze, you want to talk about ALGM?
Sure. Yeah. So my team is the managed web maintenance portion of the Amazee Labs. Amazee Labs itself is more or less a web dev agency. Been around for years as well, and IO was initially part of Labs, I believe. There's a whole genesis of how we split out and so on, which is fairly interesting, but not for now.
We're a family.
We're a family. If you guessed by the name. And at the moment, we work primarily in Drupal, React, and Gatsby. In my team, we do long-term web maintenance of primarily Drupal sites, and the rest of Labs does the standard, fairly large new build Drupal sites and so on. Just in terms of what my team does and why I'm involved in Lagoon Insights, we have for the last 3 years taken over old sites from the new builds teams and have been patching them, extending them, testing performance, making sure that they're running the latest versions of PHP, just really managing the sites, making sure they're stable and so on. And what we wanted to do was start building tools to allow us to maintain these things at scale. And from our side, part of the impetus for our involvement in Insights is precisely that. And that'll come through during this talk as well.
I lost my window. And predictably enough, I managed to break my presentation. Can you see it again now?
Yep.
Cool. So yeah, we've got a deep collaborative relationship work together on a lot of things. So Lagoon is why we're here. Lagoon is a developer-focused application delivery platform. Now, we have been telling people that we're a build and deploy platform. One of the things that we've really realized over the last few months is that we do a lot more than build and deploy. Build and deploy doesn't imply that there's anything after the deploy phase, particularly with the work that you'll see today and a lot of the other streams of work that we're undertaking. We're really a around-the-clock sort of end-to-end solution for application delivery. So we don't just help put things up on the web, we help keep them on the web, keep them running, and keep you informed about how they're doing. So Lagoon itself is made specifically for Kubernetes. There's the existing open source OpenShift version, and then there's the version that works for Kubernetes. You'll hear a little bit for us in the coming months about how OpenShift and Kubernetes and where Lagoon's going. And we've been talking about Lagoon 2 for a few months now. But basically, it all operates the same. It provides projects with the configuration, tooling, and insights needed to run in production at scale securely. So we'll take your Drupal, your Laravel, your even Python, Node, web app, and we'll add the necessary configuration to make it work in Kubernetes, but we'll also add backups and logging and metrics and insights and all these other things that are so important to help projects run in production. So on with insights. So today we'll talk about what Lagoon Insights is. We'll talk about how it's implemented in Lagoon. We'll talk about what the data sources that are currently usable inside Insights are. We'll talk about how you utilize them, how particularly Blaze and his team use these tools all day, every day in their maintenance work. We'll go through a live demo because you've got to do a live demo. Otherwise, you don't run any risk in webinars.
Well, I see that maintenance has just kicked in, so this is going to be an interesting live demo. So hopefully everything works.
I forgot about that. We'll be lucky you got a local version running. Yeah. We'll talk about how you can start using this. There's the different aspects have different sort of levels of availability, but we'll cover that. And then we'll talk about what plans are in the pipeline for Insights going forwards. So I can hand over to Blaze now and get him to tell you what Lagoon Insights are.
Sure. Thank you, Toby. Right. So Lagoon Insights, as we mentioned earlier, was really just initially just the facts and problems databases. And we've really wrapped these up in the name Lagoon Insights, but it's 3 separate systems that really work well together. So while each system works perfectly independently, the real power of all of it comes together when we start using them all together. Now, there are 3 parts. For those of you that work with Lagoon, you'll know that you have projects, which are really just what would usually be your web apps, your websites. And underneath each one of those, you have environments, which are your production, your dev, your staging environments, and so on. Standard kind of setup. And Lagoon Insights allows us to really look and work with each one of these levels, at the environment level and the project level, just managing these things. So the very first thing, which was a contribution from Salsa Digital, Stuart Rowland specifically wrote the PR for this. So big shout outs there. I don't know if you want to say anything there, Toby.
Yeah, as part of the work that Salsa Digital has been doing with GovCMS here in Australia, they had a real need to be able to classify projects. And so Stuart sort of came forwards and pitched the idea to us about having a metadata system. And for us, that made an awful lot of sense. For a user to be able to define elements about their projects is really, really critical. And Stu's use case was to be able to use it with Ansible inventories. So that in GovCMS's case, they had different levels of maintenance provided on projects, and same sort of story you'll see with Blaze. And they've also got different needs for Drupal 7, Drupal 8. So being able to classify and filter and operate differently on large lists of projects. We're talking of sort of hundreds of projects here. Being able to classify, filter them, was really important to their work. So yeah, we love it when our partners contribute to Lagoon, particularly when they've got stuff that really helps them in their day-to-day. We love seeing that.
Yeah, and exactly as Toby said, we use it inside of ALGM in exactly the same kind of way. We use the metadata system to tag our projects as part of certain groups, and then we use those to build Ansible inventories so that we can start running jobs across our entire kind of fleet of sites. So we'll take a look at the metadata subsystem, but really it's just a key value store. It's slightly more advanced than a key value store, but it works as a key value annotation system at the project level. Facts work at the environment level. These are really also, again, a key value store that keeps track of environment level data, such as the PHP version, Drupal module versions, really anything that can be calculated, can be pushed inside of the facts database. We'll talk about how we use that in a second. And then the most developed of all of this is probably the problems DB, which is, as it says there, a dynamic repository of environment level issues. So this, again, like facts, targets your prod, your staging, your dev environments, not the project as a whole. Problems with those that can be discovered by, as we'll see, Drutni or an image scan using Trivy. And this part is also integrated into the notification system, which we use to just alert us when any new critical issues come in. We get a little Slack message saying, you need to go look at this project. There's something that needs to be fixed on it. But I'll be demonstrating most of this in the demo. But these are the three sections. Anything from your side there, Toby? All good?
No, I think, as Blair said, they're three sort of slightly different things, but as we go through today, you'll see how interwoven they are and what the relationships between them are. It's been a really good exercise for us. We really like to demo and we really like to put these things forwards, because talking about them more coherently helps us really get a clear picture of why it's so important. And just as we've been discussing this webinar over the last couple of days, it's helped us go with some of the future stuff we're looking to do. The opportunities that we've seen just by having these items put together so closely and discussed in depth is really important for us. So do you want to tell us how it's implemented in Lagoon?
Yep, sure. Cool. So for anybody who's worked with Lagoon, you'll know that the primary interface to basically everything is the GraphQL API. So each of these sections, the facts, the problems, and the metadata have now got GraphQL commands that you can run. There's a bunch of associated types that let you manipulate at a project level or environment level the problems, the metadata, the facts, and so on that you have. So everything, even internally inside of Lagoon, with the various different microservices, everything basically goes through the GraphQL API. And you can just look at the GraphQL API documentation there to see anything with facts, problems, or metadata will be there. But I'll show you a couple of the queries in our demo. We also have the Lagoon UI interface for facts and problems, which I'll demo as well. These are very simple at the moment and are for almost all projects hidden by a feature flag. Toby will speak about that at the end of the talk. But this is currently live, and each project has this, but it's only internally that we're using it at the moment. But I'll demonstrate the facts and problems UI. There are UIs for them. Those are being actively developed. And then what's next on our list there, Toby? Right, cool. So for problems specifically, we've built webhooks for getting in information from Harbor, which is an image registry. We'll take a look at how that works in a second. And Drutni scans. And anybody who's worked with Drutni will know it's an auditing tool that you can run against a Drupal site. And we've built ways of processing the data from both of those. Those fill out the facts and problems for specific environments. And then finally, although this is still in early beta, we've got extensions on the Lagoon CLI for the metadata, and facts. Problems is still coming because problems are a little bit more complicated. But yeah, I will demonstrate some of the Lagoon CLI stuff this morning as well, so you can see where that's going. Cool. Right, so let's just talk about the problems DB. This is kind of useful to have in mind when we look at the demo. So one of the set of problems that we're interested in is really what is wrong, if anything, with an image that we've created inside of Lagoon. And that's not like, is there a syntax error in the Docker file or whatever, but really from the base operating system all the way through to the application level, are there any known application or known vulnerabilities that we can test this image that we've created against? So when you deploy a project in Lagoon and you create a service, let's say it's a PHP service, one of the steps inside of Lagoon is actually creating the image that's going to be deployed inside of OpenShift or Kubernetes. And when that image is created, we push that up to our Harbor image registry. This is the Harbor image registry, and you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, Toby, is available in both our OpenShift and Kubernetes setups, but OpenShift only uses their internal registry for the most part.
So currently we use the Harbor registry exclusively for the Kubernetes. So anybody who's got a site running on one of our newer Kubernetes clusters will already be using the Harbor registry. We've got, because OpenShift had its own built-in container registry, it doesn't support as much as we need it to do this image scanning. So we're coming up with a way of making that image registry, of doing a sort of a shadow copy of an image from the OpenShift registry across to Harbor to bring this functionality in. But the eventual plan is to have all sites using the Harbor image registry as the primary image registry, because it brings a much wider plugin ecosystem, and Trivy is the key one here.
Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think the shadow image push for OpenShift is coming in 1.10. Which will be our next 1.x release. So when the image is created and pushed up into Harbor, it goes ahead and invokes Trivy on that image. Now, Trivy will really scan everything. It'll scan versions of your Linux binaries or your GNU binaries. It'll dig into the image and look if there's any dependency management issues. So if you've got a composer.lock file, composer.json, your yarn.lock files, basically any dependency management artifacts, it'll dig into those as well and look at the packages to see if there are any issues with those packages. That's a fairly comprehensive scan. And at the end of that, Trivy tells Harbor, look, here is our scan results. Harbor then shoots a webhook call to Lagoon. Lagoon will then pass the results, which we'll see in a bit. And given the environment, it matches the image to the environment. It'll then write those problems to the problems database for the specific environment whose Docker image just came up. Interesting story, and we didn't speak about this yesterday. We actually found an issue with one of the Drupal modules who had checked in a whole bunch of CI data, for their test runs for the module, and Trivy started picking up the composer.lock inside of a Drupal module and reporting, hey, you're running an old version of Drupal in this file, and we pushed in a patch to that module from that as well. So it's extremely comprehensive. It scans everything. If it finds a composer.lock file, it'll scan it.
I think that also highlighted Trivy is it's an open source project itself from Aqua Security. It's we also identified behavior with Trivy that was not optimal there, and I think it was an empty composer JSON. There was right. It somewhere in So Trivy didn't know what to do with an empty composer JSON. It was expecting a composer JSON to at least have one requirement. So I think we worked with Trivy to get a fix put through for that. So yeah, it just highlights the sort of the front to backness of the open source ecosystem. We're using this stuff in production, we're identifying issues, and we're getting it fixed both ways.
Yep.
Open source is cool.
Exactly right. Cool. So that is Harbor, and we'll demo that. We'll demo that in a little bit. The other major source that we're using at the moment is Drutny, and for again all open source. Just a little bit about Drutny for anybody who's not used it. It's a Drupal site auditing tool and remediation tool, initially developed by Acquia, by some of the teams at Acquia. Toby, you can give a little talk about that quickly.
So Sean, when he was at Acquia, developed Drutny for primarily for GovCMS as the first customer. So GovCMS had a strong need for a strict audit control, knowing what modules were installed, which ones weren't, whether some tools were being used, whether themes were running PHP, whether there was to make sure things like logging and caching were enabled or disabled or set properly. Obviously, Drutny got legs inside Acquia and is broadly used throughout Acquia. Sean's now at Amazing.io, and but he doesn't do so much on Drutny these days. But Drutny is a really fantastic tool for being able to identify policies and document policies that should apply to sites, collect those policies together in a profile, and continuously test Drupal sites against those profiles and be able to report any outliers or any issues with those.
And that is exactly how we use it inside of my team. We have several Drutny profiles that we run against sites in certain circumstances. So we have a generic, service level test profile that we run that runs specific tests for, our high touch clients. We have the standard Drupal 8 profile that we just run across all of our Drupal 8 sites. We have specific performance profiles that we run. And this, we speak about driving this from AWX and Ansible, but this is really the touch point between metadata and the problems DB for us, because we draw all of the data, just like GovCMS does, to generate the lists of hosts that we need to run these policies against. So that's where the AWX comes in. We have AWX running a bunch of jobs, and one of the jobs is connect to our Drupal sites, download a custom version of Drutny that we have built. And the reason that we have got a custom build of Drutny is twofold. One, we just kind of package everything up together. And two, there was an issue in Drutny that we found and fixed. So we developed a whole bunch of systems before the patch got accepted. So we pull that down, run it against a Drupal environment, and then at the end of a Drutny audit, running a profile, it produces a report. And now the standard, you can output this as JSON, you can output this as Markdown, just as text. There's a bunch of formatters. And one of the things that we've done is we've written a Lagoon formatter that, in addition to outputting JSON, also adds some payload information to that JSON and sends it to Lagoon, which will then go and process that, consume it, and put the problems in the correct places. It figures out, oh, this is a Drutny run from this environment. The problems need to be loaded into that environment. And then if there are any, for us, we've set it to be critical. If there are any critical issues that come from Drutny, notification threshold is met, and we get a Slack message saying, in this Drutny run for this site, we've just found a critical issue, go and fix. So that is how we get data from Drutny, and we'll demo that now in a second as well. Cool, we've pretty much covered the problems right now for the data sources for these. But other than the Harbor integration and Drutny integration, You can obviously connect and write problems via the GraphQL API. So it's really open. Just like with facts, if you have the access and you want to script out some kind of problem system, you're free to do that. It will just, the problems system is pretty generic. We've been thinking about doing things with design, with user issues, integrating Cypress tests into this. Pretty much anything that can generate structured data that can be couched as a problem can be written to the problems DB, but primarily it's Trivy and Drutiny. Then for facts, the way that we're using it at the moment is for most of our sites, we're running Ansible jobs to gather facts from these sites. So that's PHP versions, Drupal versions, and so on. On one or two of our sites, we have a post rollout step that does the same thing, that will, when we deploy a site, it'll then figure out, oh, we're now running Drupal, whatever, Drupal 9, we're now running PHP version 7.4 point whatever, and that will write that back to the facts DB. Metadata, CLI and GraphQL at the moment, it's really a manual process, which makes sense given the nature of it. Anything on this, Toby?
No, I think it's, obviously we'll talk a little bit about future data sources and some of the work we're doing in that space towards the end of this, but it's a fairly nice workflow where we have it giving people the ability to do things themselves where they need to, but also automating some of the collection. Questions just come in saying, are facts and problems data accessible via GraphQL?
Indeed they are. All of that data is accessible via GraphQL, and I can demo that in a second as well.
Cool.
Cool. I think we've mostly spoken about this during this. Let's see what the yeah, I've spoken about. Okay, we will show the aggregated view today. I'll demo that. I don't think we need to worry about that too much. So facts might be an interesting one just to chat about at the moment. It's really a simple system at the moment, and we'll speak more about where it's going to be developed. But even just having the facts data as we've got it at the moment, which is really, really thin, has proven to be invaluable. We pull the facts for all of our sites, and it just gives us a level of visibility that we never had before. Figuring out which sites are running which Drupal module used to be quite a mission, because we'd have to get one of our engineers to go in, take a look at the actual site, get the data, and even if that's a 10-minute job, if you've got to do it over 80 sites, it becomes a real problem. And now, just with the facts mechanism that we have at the moment, we can pull a single list, just write that into an Excel spreadsheet or whatever, and the PMs can go and run with that, can generate some work from that. So that is a extremely useful thing for us. It's going to become more useful later, but even as it is, we find it extremely useful. Yeah, that's metadata. And as we've spoken about, we can use that really to drive lists of data. There's some other uses for metadata that might be that we've been speaking about internally. Just things like who is the technical coordinator on a project. It's one of the things that we're always interested in keeping track of, so that if somebody like myself in the SRE team wants to know, okay, for this problem that we've just found, let's say it's on the Amazy Labs website, who in our team should I forward this information on for them to do something about it? That's something that we've been thinking about using the metadata for. We don't necessarily need to, but because it's so open, you could really use it for anything.
You could use it to say who hasn't paid their bills. Although the downside is that metadata is currently editable, so the customer could just overwrite their non-paying status with the paying status, which will come to permissions later.
Right.
So
cool.
If there's any other questions at this point, holler out. Otherwise, we will hop over into a demo. Trying to keep this on my various windows. If I unshare now, Blaze should be able to pick up the share.
That should be good. Cool, I'll share now. Right. Okay, so this is going to be interesting because if we look at status, I think, yeah, it's Wednesday. Wednesday, we're currently in maintenance. So if anything breaks, forgive me, but I am running a local version of Lagoon to demo 1.10. And so that should be fairly useful. We should be able to get around. Okay, cool. So let's take a look at metadata first. Cool. So how is metadata represented internally? Well, really, it's just a JSON that's attached to your project. So we're looking at the Amazing Labs, the actual live website project data at the moment. And as you can see here, as we've discussed, we use this really to organize our sites, to generate our inventories, to generate lists for reports and so on. And if we take a look at the metadata, all we see here is we have, is this ALGM SRE? Yes, it is an ALGM SRE site. And if that's true, when we generate our Ansible inventories, this site and all of its environments will be part of our runs. So let's take a look here. What I want to show you first is make metadata, just to show that in action. I'm going to run from the CLI, just get a list of projects by metadata with the key ALGM SRE. Now, hopefully this works given the state of maintenance. If not, I'll see if we can do it in GraphQL. There we go. Cool. So this is a list of all of our SRE clients at the moment. Essentially, that's just demonstrating the metadata being used there. Not much to it. You can see the Lagoon CLI. It's running with it as well. If we want to add to it, let's just show you that. Metadata and project. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add the Insights demo key to the Amazing Labs v4. We can just say yes. And if we now look here, we should see the Insights demo. And we can now go ahead and, if we wanted to, draw a list of anything that's marked with the Insights demo tag. Then we've got that project right there. Cool. Is there anything on this? I mean, it's fairly straightforward. Anything that you could think of that I need to add here, Toby, that I've missed?
No, it's really quite basic. You can sort of add, update, delete. There's no strong typing in the metadata field unless you introduce that in a system that generates the metadata. So you've got your D8 field there is marked as true. If you marked D8 false and you did your list metadata by key, you'd still turn up with that site being listed. But it's that way on purpose. It's really quite adaptable. Tools like Ansible or AWX have got the ability to be able to search for keys and values. So yeah, its flexibility is a real benefit for us.
So here we can go and just show. I think it is metadata value, and this is how you would, just to speak to that. Sorry, this is how you would do the same thing in GraphQL. And yeah, we can just grab the all sites there by metadata. Quite string. What have I done?
You've got your key as a value.
Key and true. I think that should work. I've messed something up. So key is the wrong one. Sorry. Yeah. There we go. Doink. There we go. And that's basically what we ran in the CLI as well. So you can get all of these data out of the GraphQL endpoints as well. But yeah, fairly straightforward. So let's now look at facts. And facts are as well just straightforward, like key values, right? If you can see here, I've got no facts listed inside of the Amazing Labs for production at the moment. That's because I wanted to demo this stuff. And yeah, I mean, essentially, what I wanted to do was, and hopefully this will work. Let's run this in the background. Make facts gather. Okay, so in the background, I'm going to run Ansible. Hopefully this doesn't break because of maintenance. But what's happening in the background now is we're SSHing into the box. It's going to run a particular it's going to run a small command, and it will then go and check the PHP versions for our live site. PHP version, Drush version, and Drupal version. So while that's running, let's just do something else. I'm just going to add a fact using the CLI. You can see here that we're adding the fact Lagoon Insights, and we're just adding some arbitrary number to it, some arbitrary version number to it. And if we now go ahead and pull that, you'll see that you've got the facts key value there, Lagoon Insights 0.5.1, which is exactly what we passed through on the CLI. And if we now go to the facts tab, we see that fact inserted here. Again, it doesn't seem like very much. It really is just a straightforward key value store here, but its real value comes when it starts being integrated with systems that populate these facts data and do that automatically. So let's see how we're going there. All right, that's still running in the background. All right, so while that's going, I think let's go ahead and let's just say make facts list. I mean, you can list these in the CLI as well. Not very much to it. But let's go into the problems DB, which is the most developed part of this. You see, things are breaking. Let's try again. Cool, so problems, let's look at that. All right, so I will do this inside of my local Lagoon, and that way you can see a couple of things that you wouldn't be able to see live. I mean, firstly, I don't want to show any actual security issues if there are any. So, you know, our Ansible scripts are running the whole time. We don't want to give anything away, obviously, in a public forum. But if we take a look at High Cotton, which is just our demo kind of environment, demo project, right now we have no problems, non-critical, high, medium, and low, and so on. So first thing I'm going to demonstrate is how Harbor integrations work. So let's take a look here in Harbor. In Harbor, we've got a test repository where we've just pushed up an Alpine image, right? If you take a look here, you'll see that we can actually just do a scan here. The scans are pretty quick. It's just queuing it up there. Should take a second. Now, when the scan is complete,
we should have done this with a Java image just to show just how many vulnerabilities you can get.
Do you want to see the Java image? Because we've got one there. Java images are really not great. So if we take a look at the Java repository, I think, yeah, here is the vulnerabilities that we get in Java. And this is all actually, this has nothing to do with the application running. This is all actually at the image level. So if you jump in there, you'll see there's things with the, issues with apt, with bash, bzip, so on. I mean, this is a fairly old one, so there's a lot of issues. And part of the reason that we haven't yet released the problems into the wild is that at the moment, everything that you see on this list will come through to the problems tab. And we're working on management tools at the moment. We'll speak to that in a second. But yeah, it's interesting. So let's just go back to this. So Alpine, as you see, we have a single problem. And that problem is with OpenSSL, and we don't see any problems here. So I'm going to simulate the webhook here, webhook run Harbor. If we take a look here, we should see that being processed in the background by Lagoon. And going back to this, we see that now reflected in our list of problems here. And so you can see it pulls over as much from trivia as it can, the severity level. It shows us that the source of this problem is Harbor. We'll see that that changes depending on where the problems come through. When it was last detected on the system before this, the package that's affected, it also pulls off the top link, but we've got all of the advisory issues down here in our raw data. You can click through to that, take a read of what the actual issue is, and yeah, go ahead and fix it. And the next time you push the image, it will scan it again, and if you've addressed the issue in OpenSSL, it will then go ahead and disappear. You can see that that's the version that's fixed in. So generally with this, what you do is you go to problem, see what the package is, update the package in the image, redeploy the site, and then this issue will disappear. Right. So see, facts are still breaking, and we're pretty much guaranteed that's because of maintenance. So we'll just carry on with the problems. Okay, so we've looked at that, problems from Harbor. I just want to show what Drutny issues would look like as well. I'm not going to run this on our live site for the same reason that the facts seem to be breaking. When maintenance is happening, certain things can go a little bit haywire with services not being available. So let us run a Drutny demo here, make webhooks run Drutny. So what I'm going to be doing here is basically simulating what happens when we connect to an environment and run our Drutny there. This JSON that you'll see stream past us now is precisely the JSON that gets sent to the backend, which gets verified and is used to populate problems. You see here, this should look familiar to anybody who has run Drutny and looked at the JSON outputs. If we look at what's going on inside of Lagoon, it's logging the issues. It's picked up all of these issues. And if we now go to High Cotton and take a look, we will see all of the Drutny issues. And you see here, the big differentiator is the source. We now know that the source of this problem is Drutny, and specifically the D8 profile, which contains a bunch of tests that we run against the sites. So same kind of thing. We've got the issue title, the description of the issue, its severity level. We respond specifically to critical and high in our teams when it was created. And yeah, I mean, we see here that it affects Drupal. So we know that this is a Drupal issue. Something that happens that's quite interesting is that you'll often, if there's a Drupal level issue, Trivy will also pick that up if it's got the vulnerability listed. It's slight, the update will take about 24 hours, but you can often see module issues duplicated in Trivy that we'd pick up with our Drutny audits. Anything here from your side, Toby? You need to speak about?
I think it's there's obviously a lot of ability to over monitor things. So it's really critical that you get the severities right.
Yeah.
Drutny has the ability to put different severities to different policies as part of a profile. And if you have those slightly wrong, you'll start to obviously wildly spam people. I mean, drawing back slightly on the ability to manage some of these problems from the dashboard. Yeah, you've got to, and one of the reasons that, as I'll talk about in a second, how to get access to this, is you've got to be really on top of your notifications, because otherwise you will cause an avalanche of notifications that need to be acknowledged. Yeah, so make sure you're monitoring exactly what you need to monitor. There's a bit of a trial and error in there.
Awesome. So just one thing, I see the facts have run. Let's just take a look here. So that actually started working. You can see here now, we run this across all of our sites internally just so we can keep track of what version of Drush, Drupal, and PHP we're running across everything. We also can run it for modules. We've got stuff in pipeline for node versions and so on, but the AWX job ran and we now have our versions in here. And this is useful for reporting on facts. One more thing I just wanted to show, given that I'm running locally, is one of the things that we use internally is our little problems dashboard, which gives us this little hexagonal grid of all of our sites. And if any of these are red, we know there's something that we need to jump on immediately. We can click onto that. We can see it's our project High Cotton, and this is our critical issue. This is in real active development at the moment. It's just more giving you all an idea of what's coming in the future. But you know, these kinds of insight dashboards are extremely useful, and there will be a lot more in the future. But yeah, that's where we are with the demo. I think that is everything. I'll stop sharing now.
And I will restart sharing. So in the demo, we saw how to work with metadata, how to create it, how to read it, how to return based on its presence. Blaze talked about how the global maintenance team uses that metadata to drive their inventory creation inside Ansible. And it's really key being able to target. We've got thousands of sites, and ALGM has a healthy stable of sites they support, but they don't need to run unnecessary tasks on sites that they're not responsible for. So being able to hone in on the exact ones is really important. And for other people who are managing even a 10 or a 20 site portfolio, being able to classify them, know which ones are which, run some tasks on one but not on the other, it's going to be really handy going forwards. Working with problems, we saw how Drutiny can be run in the Lagoon environment. That pushed those issues with the Drupal site back into the problems database. We could see that there was some caching disabled, and there was JavaScript aggregation wasn't enabled, and the cron hadn't run for the last however many hours. Blaze could see all those come up in that problems, and if one of them was classified as critical, it would have shown up in his little hexagon dashboard. And those facts we saw, the facts in that case were being generated by the Ansible run. The facts were being generated from the environments, calculated and computed.
Exactly right.
We are working on making deploy time facts available for more projects. So the idea is, whenever you deploy a container into Kubernetes, its state can change. Its state can only effectively change as a deployment time. So at that deployment time, what we'd really like to do is be able to harvest the pertinent facts from that site. So if you push out a Drupal update to a site, your fact will get overwritten from Drupal 8.9.6 to 8.9.7. It's really important to note that facts aren't a time series. A fact is a very moment in time. I can't use facts to tell you when you updated from Drupal 8.9.6 to 8.9.7. All I know is that you are currently on 8.9.7. It's something we might look at in the future, but it's, as with all of our development of Lagoon, it's very much led by customer demand. If it's something that customers want, that sort of interrogation level audit history, then yeah, we could certainly, I'm sure we've got 100 ideas about things we could implement that way. So how to start using this? Metadata is available for use now. All Lagoon users are able to create, view, and update metadata on their sites, and be able, it may have limited utility if you're not using an AWX type tool, but certainly if you've got GraphQL access, you can use that to filter sites back and to be able to return and make sure you operate on the correct sets. Facts, we're looking at enabling a very basic fact. So yeah, the PHP version, the Drupal version, we're looking at enabling that for all sites on Amaze.io hosted platforms shortly. We're just going through the final stages of making that ready. So you'll see, if you log into your Lagoon site, on the dashboard, you'll have that little facts button, and you'll be able to see that that shows you're at Drupal version whatever, PHP version or whatever. A lot of that's from our point of view. We want to start having a little bit of insights, particularly with PHP 7.2 end of life coming up. Being able to know who's running end of life PHPs, and that's one of the things that we'll look to do is being able to use facts to generate problems. And this is where we sort of talk about the whole everything starts joining up. Running an end of life version of PHP isn't a vulnerability necessarily. So Trivy might not detect it as being vulnerable. So it might not report through Trivy, but it should probably be logged, not a high criticality problem, but it should be logged as a problem that you're running an unsupported version of PHP. And likewise, the people that are running PHP 5.6, 7, 7.1. I don't think we've got anyone on PHP 5.4 still, but
yeah, I think we do.
But it's a really good way of being able to collect that kind of data, surface that. If we could generate problems off the back of facts, we can then start to nudge and nurdle some of our non-maintained customers towards a better profile. We won't start doing sort of full in-depth auditing because that's not something we're there to do, but being able to surface that information for people is going to be something that's really important. To enable problems, what we're suggesting is that if you've got a TAM, if you've got an account manager, if you've got a relationship with sales, have a chat with them, because it's really quite in-depth. Being able to enabling the Trivy thing, as we saw with that Java image, if you've got if you're using our upstream Lagoon images, those Lagoon images will have problems reported with them in between releases. The life cycle of particularly Linux applications is that way. Every time we do a new release of Amaze.io base images, we aim to address as many of those upstream vulnerabilities as we can. Occasionally, we can't address all of them. It might be for compatibility reasons. It might be that there isn't just the fix just isn't available at that point, because we rely on Alpine for our sources. So it comes with a few caveats. If you switch problems for Trivy on day one, you may see a lot of issues that maybe we just want you to be prepared and understand what that means. To enable the Drutiny scanning takes a bit of additional configuration. You've got to make sure that you've got the Drutiny binaries running, that you're able to run the correct tests, that you've got your profiles and policies set up properly. We think it's massively useful for people that run multiple sites, definitely, having the ability to see those kind of problems. And as Blaise said, that problems database, that's not ready for mainstream yet, but sneaky plug, we've got job ads out there at the moment for a product designer. So if you know someone who's a UX guru, product designer, who wants to come in and help work on these sort of things with us and the Amaze Labs team, hit those jobs up and come over and join us. Because I'm not saying that we need a bit of UX expertise, but
it would help.
It would save us from doing it.
Yeah, we mostly back end people, so yeah, we need some of that front end love.
Obviously, if you're not a current Amaze.io customer, well, why not? This sounds like really, really good. It sounds like the sort of stuff that you really should be seeing for all of your sites. Drop us a line, hello@Amaze.io. So what else have we got coming in this space?
Cool. Yeah. So as we mentioned there, we're going to add new sources for problems and facts. One of the things we've been playing with internally is, for example, accessibility testing for websites, and being able to run, just your standard ALI tests at whatever level, at least automated, gives you some sense of the accessibility issues on your site that can be generated and pushed into the problems DB. So we're looking really at sources that aren't purely technical, as in there's a new package released, but rather issues with UX, with performance, with more general caching. So that's going to be the new sources of problems. Facts, as you've mentioned, we're building a more robust binary to check against pretty much any of the environments we support, and get a lot more data. But facts can really come from anywhere, including, as we noticed, as we point out there, analytics data that may be pertinent to your site. So that's new sources there. I don't know if you want to chat any more about that.
No, I'll talk a little bit about permission levels. Obviously, as we discussed, the metadata is, it's currently anybody that's got permission to be able to edit metadata can edit metadata. So whether one of Blazor's customers is able to go in and suddenly stop ALG MSRE from managing their site, why they do that, I don't know, but we're never entirely sure what some of our customers do sometimes. So we're looking at putting slightly tighter permission levels around those facts and metadata. If we're starting to build more robust integrations around them, we need to know that some of that data can't be modified, it can't be edited. If we're computing that someone's a Drupal 8 site and the customer goes in and tries to change that fact to say that they're Drupal 9 in the misguided hope that that alone will upgrade their site to Drupal 9, that could have unintended consequences. So we just want to make sure we get those permission levels right. As someone who manages lots of platforms, there might be some facts or metadata that shouldn't be visible to customers. Example, whether there was the ability to set whether a customer has a particular support level or whatever. So being able to set some permission levels around adding, updating, deleting, viewing facts and metadata.
And what's coming with problems and facts as well, and you mentioned it slightly earlier as well, Toby, was a system to start generating problems from facts that we gather. And so we're looking really at tighter integration between these three systems. On the one hand, you saw that hexagonal grid. This leads us into a broader discussion of problem management as a whole. So we'll be looking at more dashboards, cool ways of working with problems, such as tagging problems as having been resolved, even if they aren't necessarily reflected as resolved in the system yet, ways of suppressing problems for a certain time. You can also chat about this from a group level and platform level, Toby.
Yeah, definitely. Being able to the last point is particularly pertinent for us. If everybody had full access to problems, they would see that deluge of OpenSSL issues with our base images. From our point of view, one of the systems we want to build in before we make this properly available to everyone is our ability and as Amazy.io to say, we know that OpenSSL issue is an issue with the October release of the Amazy images. We will be fixing it in the November release. So being able to suppress that that warning is one thing. Being able to acknowledge that issue for the entire platform at once, so that rather than you get a notification saying, hey, there's an OpenSSL high criticality on your site, if it's something that we can control, we can acknowledge that problem and we can annotate it potentially and say, as soon as we release the next version of Amazio images, update, and this will go away. So we can leave you with your problems and we can handle our problems, so that you can really focus on the Drupal issues. You can focus on the front end. So if you've got Yarn or NPM stuff in there as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, any the ability to annotate and kind of triage problems and just really manage them generally is something that we're actively working on at the moment. And obviously PRs are always appreciated.
So any final questions before we wrap up? Obviously, this is being actively worked on. Anybody who studiously watches our GitHub repos will see the PRs flooding in from Blaze and Tim about this. Over the last few weeks, months, we've been discussing a little bit of Lagoon 2, and you would have heard us talk about Lagoon 1x. There will be a period of time over the next few months where we do sort of a little bit of diverging development. Lagoon 1x is the version of Lagoon that works on OpenShift, and Lagoon 2x is the version of Lagoon that runs in Kubernetes. Our aim is to get all of the Amazio hosted infrastructure across to Lagoon 2 in the next few months. But we will still need to maintain 1x support for a little bit. So we're trying to bring as much of this across to 1x as we can, just to make sure that we've got some level of parity. So you'll see PRs going to different places doing different things, and you'll see duplication. But yeah, it's under active development. One of the main goals of Lagoon 2 is to make it easier for contributors, for people to be able to run and spin up their own implementation of Lagoon so that you can see and test this yourself in your local. So with no further questions, if you want to find out more about what we're doing, head over to our website, www.amazy.io. We're trying to post actively on the blog there. So a lot of the updates about Lagoon, a lot of the updates about upcoming webinars and events we'll put there. Obviously, reach out to the team if you've got an existing relationship or contact with us. If you've got access to our Rocket chat, ask us questions. But yeah, we're always happy to hear from people who've got use cases that we haven't thought of. We obviously, Blaze and his team have got fantastic experience running hundreds of sites on Lagoon, something that we don't necessarily have as IO. So his perspective is really important, but likewise, your perspective as people that are using these sites as well is really valuable to us in our product development process. So with that, I will wrap up. Thank you all so much for coming. Really appreciate you, and we will catch up with you very soon to talk about whatever's next.
Cool. Thanks all, and thanks, Toby.
Thank you, Blaze.